Hey, this is KNOX Hamilton. You're listening to Recess with Spinelli.
Washed up together.
You are tuned in to Recess with Spinelli here on WSPN, Hoxton FM, the International Radio Festival, and the New York State Music Blog. And today we are here with the alternative rockers from Little Rock, Arkansas, KNOX Hamilton. Their new album, The Heights, is out and available now. Thank you so much for joining me today, guys.
Thank you for having us, man.
Now, I understand this album has pretty much, it's been a long time in the making, I assume, because you guys have had some EPs come out in the past. It's got some material that's a few years old. Let's talk about it.
We had half of the album pretty much recorded and done, and then we switched labels and essentially had to or requested that we do the album kind of over again, which was good. We had to do some new takes on some of the old songs, like Rightfully So and Set It On Fire. And so I think as much as we would have liked for the album to come out in 16 or 15 even, there was new songs on it like Pretty Way to Fight that never would have been on the album had it not been delayed. So in the end, it was a good problem to have, I think.
So were they requesting a different sonic change? What was the label looking for that maybe wasn't present on some of the earlier recordings?
It was less of like requesting and more of like, we have a new label, we have new people who have different takes on the songs, new producers worked on the songs. So it was less of like someone wanting a different change and more, it was kind of like the evolution is more organic, like Tim Pagnata did like the newer songs instead of like us doing them by ourselves in Little Rock, which obviously sounded a little bit better. So it was a mixture of what we wanted to do as well as what the label was kind of championing us to do as well.
What are your thoughts on albums in general? It definitely seems musicians have, or at least are split between the concept of releasing singles, EPs, or albums. Obviously it takes more time, more resources to release an album. Do you think it's still a viable way to get your music out there in a timely fashion for the listeners?
It's definitely not timely, just because even if you record everything on your own, you can still be like Passion Pit or one of those bands who used to record everything in his room, and it still, you put it out through a distributor, you put it out through a label, and it still takes a little while. But with that being said, I as a music fan, when bands that I like Phoenix is about to put out a new album, I'd prefer them to put out an album to where I can listen to 12 songs as opposed to just one song over and over again.
If I really like a band, I want an entire album. I don't want just an EP. So we try to think of it that way. If somebody really likes us, then they're going to want 12, 13 songs as opposed to like 3 or 4.
So actually, when you're listening to some of the bands that you like, maybe like Phoenix in this regard, what do you find you gravitate towards musically, either album-wise or on stage-wise for an on-stage presence that makes you really engage with the music and really feel the moment?
I'm not a huge live music fan. When it comes to people like the Killers, like we saw the Killers and Paul McCartney at like Firefly, like bands like that, I'm very, but I think I'm more of an album person. I love going to live shows, but we do that all year round, so I can't just say that I would just pick up and go to a show on my own, kind of take a break from the live sound, if not for my ears' sake. So I'm an album fan, and I just look for catchy hooks and things that just keep me coming back to the song.
How's your words, your eyes? I don't want to come back down yet.
Now, actually diving into the band's history, going back a ways, I read somewhere that you guys started off as a church band. Is that right?
We all met in church. Yeah. So we've all played in church at some point or the other in our lives. But we've always played more along the lines of secular, if you can, not Christian based. So we never we've never all three played together in church. Okay. But we all met in church, and my dad's pastor of a church. That's why we moved to Little Rock about 15 years ago now from Texas. So that would be Boots and Kobo, drummer and vocalist. Drew is also here with this guitarist. We met him at our dad's church about 6-7 years ago. So we all met in church, but we've never actually been a church band.
So what dynamic, what does that bring to the table that maybe other bands don't have experience-wise? I'm assuming when you're playing in a church, the audience or the people who are sitting there are probably much more attentive than, let's say, if you're playing in a bar.
Well, one thing we have other bands known is Jesus. And, no, it's joking.
We thought local natives must be like Pentecostal or something, because we found like harmonies and stuff, it just comes natural. Not for me, but like for most bands like Pentecostals, whatever, harmony's huge, like 4, 5, 10-part harmony. So it's like that's kind of like that's always been in our music, even though it's rock and roll. It's always been kind of pretty harmony, because that's like what influenced us in church.
Yeah, church is rhythm. Church is, clapping your hands and, shouting, or our church, what we grew up in. So yeah, the rhythmic, like harmonic, catchy songs that the whole congregation can sing along to. That's all definitely rooted in us from a very early age, for sure.
Having that experience going into the more of like the professional setting, actually trying to make a name for yourselves, did you find that you had a natural way to try and get people engaged with your music then?
I've never actually been able to do that yet. I find it less, almost like frustrating, because it does come so naturally to the people that we grew up around. Like it's just what you kind of do in church, to where there's not a code at a club or a venue. Like people can do what they want, or not what they want, but people aren't just going to clap just because that's what people do in a church. So it's actually more effort. Like you definitely spend more, like the pastor or the preacher doesn't go up there and like put your hands together, like let's clap, whatever, because people are already clapping, because it's Pentecostals and they're crazy in a good way. And so the club is different. It's people are going at their own pace, so you kind of have to work more for their cooperation.
Anybody in the family play any instruments as well?
My mom is a great singer. Monacobo's mom, she's probably one of the best live singers I've actually ever heard. Like she's very good. My poppy played guitar a little bit, and other than that, I don't think we know. I mean, nobody in our family really plays anything.
So was it from the musical setting in the religious aspect that kind of exposed you to music and made you say, this is something that's interesting?
Yeah, for sure. I played drums in our church ever since I was like 5 or 6 years old, just because no one else did, because our church was like 25 people when we were first growing up, and we Pentecostals have music, and they have piano and guitar and drums and bass, so we kind of had to. But yeah, that's always been my favorite part about church, for sure. I'm sure Kobo's too. At that early of an age, that's what makes church interesting to a adolescent. Don't really go for the word. So yeah, that was the only interesting thing to me, growing up, because our life was so church centered. Like we went to church almost every single day, in one aspect or another. So yeah, music was always kind of like that entertainment to kind of get you through it.
How would you describe the music scene in Little Rock? Would you say it is largely church-based, or is there a music scene here in Albany as far as bar-based? Or
people who like the same things that we do, they're pretty much all going to a church and playing at a church. There's 4 or 5 huge churches in Little Rock of 6, 7, 700 people or more. I don't know. Yeah. And they all have really big production. We have a bunch of friends who all play different roles in churches, and some work full time, which is crazy to me that our church was always too small to actually work full time at the church. So yeah, if you're playing this kind of alternative music in Little Rock, you're most likely playing it at a church.
So actually, if there isn't too many non-church venues out there, as far as getting your name outside of Little Rock, then do you have to rely on media such as radio and internet then? Definitely.
Spotify got us our record label, and Alt Nation got us on the radio. So Sirius XM Channel 36. Shout out to Regan for putting us on the map, for sure.
Actually, what are your thoughts on traditional media versus internet? What do you find being the best tool in the chest or the best tool for a musician at this point?
I'd say internet is still pretty indie, DIY. You can do it without a budget, which is nice for us, obviously. But still, those big modes of media, the big TV, big radio, those are career makers. So, if you land big radio stations like that, that's it. So that's still the pinnacle. But right now, the internet is just the avenue to get there, which that's been our experience anyway.
And before we head off for tonight, is there anything else that you would like to add that you think the listeners should know about?
The Heights is out now.
our album.
Super pleased, pretty pleased.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, guys.
Thank you, buddy.
Thanks, man.
You have been tuned in to Recess with Spinelli here on WSPN, Hoxton FM, the International Radio Festival, and the New York State Music Blog. We've been speaking with KNOX Hamilton from Little Rock, Arkansas. Their new album, The Heights, is out and available now.